We have got to stop meeting like this. Most of you know that my name is Marlene Dubois. I am the creator of this amazing thing. I can't believe how big the crowd is. I was told I was competing with the opera and Springtime Tallahassee, and I said, well, I don't need to make that many programs. I was mistaken. It's so wonderful to see you all. As some of you might know, this is our 8th time of doing Westminster Storytellers. And you're going to have a wonderful time tonight. We have 4 new storytellers and one rock of Judy Jolly, and another one who's told one story also. I don't want to take up much time talking here, except maybe I should say turn off phones. That would be a good idea. One Amber Alert and we'd be done. I did want to make just one comment for this evening. I've been told by some of my storytellers that some of you have stories, but you're not sure maybe how to put it on paper, how to arrange it. And I'm thinking that if these people exist, and I'm pretty sure they do, I would be more than willing to just do a class so that you can come and find ways to put your stories down in the order that you would like to tell them. Because I know with all my heart, you all have stories. So, without much further ado, I want you all to sit back, relax, and enjoy the Westminster Storytellers.
My first teaching job in 1961 was at Pensacola High School with 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I was so scared the first day that I lost my voice for a couple of days. However, the students were so sweet as I whispered to them that I recovered quickly and I fell in love with them. At the end of an early class, a girl asked me, "Do you want us to learn these spelling words or just know them?" "I want you to do both," I said, and she seemed happy. When I had time off, I checked on her file in the principal's office. Her IQ was very low, but at that time, we were socially promoting. Fortunately, she only caused one more problem. A few weeks later, some boys were standing at the back of the room with her when I entered from outside the door, where we were required to stand and watch students change classes. If a girl had too short a dress, we were supposed to send her to the principal's office, where they phoned a parent to bring her something longer to wear. Well, my students were always seated when I came in, so this time I was puzzled to see so many of them up. As I walked toward them, I saw that the girl was showing them a gun. "Oh, what a pretty gun," I said to her. "Let me see it." She handed it to me, and I told her that I would keep it safe in my purse. When I had a period off, I took the gun to the principal's office, where I was told that he was too busy to see me. Well, I took the gun out of my purse and told the vice principal, "Please give this to the principal." Well, you know I was taken right in to the principal. And he later explained to me that he called the parents, but after he checked the gun, which was not loaded, thank goodness. 6 weeks later, 2 young girls appeared in my senior class with papers saying they were going to attend. Well, as soon as I had a break, I went to the principal. And he said the girls had made their first-year teacher cry. So he sent them to me. Well, I'm a first-year teacher too. And then he said, well, you've had more experience dealing with people since you were a journalist on the Pensacola News-Journal. Well, both girls made 100 on the first grammar test. I called them to my desk and I told them that when I taught grammar, they were to sit near my desk and write a play together. And you must whisper, I added. I never had a problem with them. They both later signed up for the newspaper class and did well. Well, now, actually, one of the girls got me in trouble with the faculty sometime later. When I went into the cafeteria for lunch, I took my sandwich and I just bought a cup of coffee. We were still on duty and we only had about 17 minutes to eat after going to the restroom. To my amazement, my place was set up on a doily with a full lunch, complete with dessert. The teacher next to me said I should not get so friendly with the students. Several of the teachers frowned at me and I was really embarrassed. A first-year teacher has a lot to learn. One day, I commented in the newspaper class that some people were stealing garbage cans, and I added that someone had stolen my parents' garbage can. A few days later, I learned that one of my students had stolen 2 garbage cans across town and then left them at my parents' house. The problem grew bigger because he stole from a policeman who saw him, followed and arrested him. Happily, the boy was mainly just fussed at and kept in jail until his parents arrived to pick him up. Nothing was put on his record, thank goodness. I learned to keep my mouth shut about me and my family. About 8 years later, I was teaching at TCC when streaking was popular. I saw a naked boy from my second-floor office. A short time later, a female student in my newspaper class rushed into my office and screamed that she had made a terrible mistake. I saw the streaker rush past me and get in a truck and that it pulled up near him. And if I had taken off my shirt and jumped in the truck, Miss Jolly, I would have gotten a wonderful story. Well, I assured her that she would have been making a terrible mistake and could even have gotten hurt. Was I relieved? In about 1970, I was in the TCC newspaper class the first day of school. A young woman walked in the door and she looked around. I am your token, she announced. You are my what? I asked. I am your token. I am the only colored student here. Well, that makes you very special, I said, and I walked over and hugged her. She was an excellent student, and she was accepted by everyone on the staff. Later, I took her and about a dozen other students to Miami to a community college journalism convention. Well, she was thrilled to be elected president by the other students attending the conference. She had a wonderful personality.
Mabel Chain, better known as Aunt May, was my role model. I wanted to do all the things she did. She was my mother's older sister, not married, and had no children of her own. But she invested herself in the lives of my younger brother and me, filling them with love and laughter. She was a businesswoman, dressed stylishly, had lots of creative hobbies, traveled every year, and best of all, loved being with children. And that was a good thing, because my mother, 2 brothers, and I moved in with my grandparents and May when I was 4. My mother worked night and day as a banquet waitress to support us, and so she was gone a lot. But May was there to help nurture us. Reading, playing board games, playing cards. We'd learn to bake as some of the activities we could count on. My younger brother and I spent lots of time outdoors, playing in nearby fields and woods. When we found a baby rabbit left in the nest after a cat had invaded, we'd rush it home to May. She would help us line a shoebox with an old towel, prepare a hot water bottle to warm him, and set an alarm so we could get up with her during the night to feed him with a doll's bottle. And she was there in the morning to mop up the ocean of tears we shed on the kitchen floor when the tiny creature succumbed. May loved life and was interested in everything around her. She was a voracious reader and passed on her love of reading. And how we loved to listen to stories she made up, especially when she recounted the tale of Elmer Rabbit and his adventures. I remember well the episode in which he hitchhiked from our home in Massachusetts to Florida and encountered an alligator. Nights she oversaw our bedtime, we could get May to sit at the top of the stairs and weave her tales until we fell asleep. Well, of course, we always claimed to be afraid of the dark and were too scared to go to sleep. And of course, she was on to us. She later told us she derived as much pleasure as we did from story time. During World War II, she had served in the waves and was stationed in Hawaii. There she had numerous adventures and met many friends whom she visited after her service. From her travels, she brought us fascinating gifts and tales. Crepe paper leis and a real grass skirt were highly prized. She took accompanying slides and kept journals with verbal pictures as vivid as her photos. They were a hit when I was allowed to take some to show and tell at school. By the time she retired, she moved to Indian Shores, Florida, a 5-hour drive from our home in Tallahassee. By that time, I had 2 young daughters who adored her. We spent lots of time with May between our homes. "The spoiler is coming," they would shout with glee. Visions of her French toast donkeys dripping with syrup, hours of Yahtzee or board games, trips to Pizza Hut for a Super Supreme, followed by Baskin and Robbins for whatever confection they wanted, and movie marathons danced in their heads. May's apartment at the beach was a family fun magnet, and we spent most of our vacations there. Relatives from frozen north would come to visit May, and we'd drive down to reconnect with family. We made forays to Disney World, Busch Gardens, and the Cagpot Tree. At Tiki Gardens, searching for an oyster in hopes of finding a real pearl brought joy. Watching the peacocks bedding down for the night, accompanied by a raucous cackling, was a delight to May and the children. Come on. With the ladies in her apartment complex, May was into handcrafts big time. Each of us treasured the macrame Santa heads ceramic Christmas trees, and other ornaments she made for us. Following May's instructions, my family chimes, "Merry Christmas, Aunt May," with joy and a tear when we unpack them every year. And we all swear we can hear her answer. Knitting was one of her special skills that she used to create darling outfits for my daughters. A favorite one was jumpers decorated with ladybugs. They were so delighted and wore them frequently. Birthdays and April Fool's Days were favorites with our family. May went along with whatever brought us laughter. One spring break in April, while visiting May, we joined her at the breakfast table. The girls were unusually quiet until May said, "I can't believe you girls don't know what day this is." Looking at each other in horror, they wailed, "Oh no, did we forget your birthday?" And Aunt May and I were off. We immediately went along with their mistaken belief, from buying a birthday card, picking out a paperback book she might like, making dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant, and requesting a birthday cake with sparklers. We were all about May's birthday. And after a joyful version of Happy Birthday, and the last sparkler was doused, May and I gleefully chorused, "April Fools!" The girls were joined in laughter by nearby diners. And what can I say about May and my beloved Siamese cat, Smokey? Never a fan of cats. May was dumbfounded to learn I paid money for a cat. But she was determined to tolerate Smokey when she visited us. That meant tolerating all sorts of assaults on her sanity. If she left her suitcase open, which she invariably did, he would make himself comfortable in it while lining her belongings with fur. Was he bored? He'd sneak into her room and snag her knitting project to use the ball of yarn for a soccer ball. Her cries of, "That damn cat!" brought the girls running to shoo him out and shut her door. Makes one wonder if she enjoyed the battle. I think May's heart broke when she had the stroke that incapacitated her. Even after months of therapy, she was unable to walk, but she never lost her spirit. Nephews carried her on a chair down to the beach at Wells, Maine, at one of our family reunions. She was the terror of the nursing home in Florida in her electric wheelchair. And finally, cousins talked her into moving into a nursing home in Connecticut where loved ones could visit her more easily. At that time, I was living and working in an international school in Caracas, Venezuela. On a trip north to visit my family, I was able to visit her with my fiancé, who was from South Africa and whose accent tickled her. When we were leaving her, I asked if she gave Victor her stamp of approval. She took my hand and smiled, saying, "You know I'd love anyone you loved, Di." We have all missed May and think of her often. I was recently reminiscing with my daughter and wishing we could pick up the phone to talk with May. Whenever the phone rang at supper time, we always knew she was calling. She knew when to find us at home. I wish we could talk with her again and thank her for being in our lives. May, we love you and miss you and keep you in our hearts. P.S. Give Smokey a pat for us too.
It was the summer of 1957. I had completed my first semester as a high school English teacher, followed by a 6-week grand tour of Europe. I was almost home. My mother picked me up at the Illinois Central train station in Springfield for the last leg of my journey. As we rode along, I distinctly recall emphatically announcing to my mother that next summer I was going to the Navajo reservation. And I did. I applied to the National Board of Missions of the Presbyterian Church USA and was assigned to Ganado Mission as an evangelical worker. Ganado Mission was located in the northeast corner of Arizona, elevation 6,000 feet. It was established in 1901. By 1958, it had a grade school, a high school, a handsome church, a hospital founded in 1912, and a dining hall where I had ample opportunity to enjoy Navajo fry bread. I was curious about the process by which fry bread was made in the natural setting of a hogan and a wood stove and a wood fire rather than over a gas stove. I made arrangements with Mrs. Mabel Woodman, who lived in a hogan near the mission and worked at the mission hospital. The hospital kitchen gave me a canister of lard, yes, lard, to take to Mrs. Woodman as a thank you for her cooperation. Graciously, Mrs. Woodman received her visitors, Dr. Karen Marcus and myself. Mrs. Woodman had a dimple-trimmed smile, not commonly seen among the Navajo. We met the family of adorable Indian children: Cora, 11, Evan, 9, Ronald, 7, Marlene, 3, and Maureen, 3 months. Mrs. Woodman brought the dry ingredients, a bucket of water, and a dishpan from the hogan and placed them on a small table. Cora started the fire with wood, kerosene, and matches. Who says Indians rub stones together to make a fire? A heavy iron skillet was set on 3 empty cans of equal size. The fire was then pushed under the skillet. The cans made an excellent support for the skillet. With lots of interest from her children, Mrs. Woodman began mixing the ingredients for fry bread. All of the dry ingredients were measured with her hand. Water from the bucket was poured from a glass. I wondered how Mrs. Woodman would describe the quantities she used to someone wanting to make fry bread. So I asked bilingual Cora to ask her mother for the recipe. This is what she gave: 3 bowls of flour. Cora quickly went into the hogan and got a bowl to show us the size. A teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 4 glasses of water. Her glass was like a commercial jelly glass. Mrs. Woodman did all the mixing and kneading with her hands. When the dough was moist but not sticky, she pinched off a ball. This she slapped from fist to fist and then from palm to palm. Occasionally, she gently pulled the edges of the dough. The result was a beautifully shaped circle of dough, evenly distributed and free from gaping holes. When the grease was very hot, the raw dough was eased into the skillet. After the dough turned golden brown on both sides, Mrs. Woodman removed the fry bread to make way for another piece. Nobody had to tell Marlene that the fry bread, or ba, was good. Although it was made every 3 to 4 days, fry bread never ceased to be a treat for the Navajo. Marlene was eager to get a piece of fry bread or ba, but her mother apparently said no. Marlene lay on the ground and wept. Mrs. Woodman and I sampled a piece of this batch of fry bread, while dejected Marlene looked on and patiently awaited her turn for ba. I so enjoyed my time working with the Navajo and observing in the nursery of the hospital their darling newborn, who presented with a generous shock of black hair, that I was inspired to become a registered nurse. I had the great privilege of returning to Ganado 20 years later as a nurse employed by Navajo Nation at the newly constructed Hope Hospital, located just across the road from the mission. But I'll save those stories for another time. Thank you.
When I was a child, my family had an outdoor cat for a couple of years. And while I was in medical school, my wife Patty and I served as cat sitters for a pair of Siamese to help out a friend. These two cats, Fudge and Mocha, introduced us to the feline world. But by the mid-1980s, struggling with the demands of a busy medical practice and trying to help raise two active little boys, taking on the additional responsibility of a pet was the last thing I wanted to do. But fate had other plans. My mother-in-law spent Thanksgiving 1986 with us. As she was leaving, she said, "Oh, by the way, I've been feeding a little stray kitten on the back patio. I hope you don't mind." Sure enough, we found a tiny black kitten shivering in the cold, looking expectantly through the sliding glass door. I'd always heard that feral cats can fend for themselves, and thought the kitten would be fine. Patty didn't agree. There were negotiations. Finally, in the interest of domestic tranquility, I agreed that given the cold weather, I would let the cat spend the night in our downstairs bathroom, if and only if the temperature outside were below freezing. This was to be a temporary, not a permanent arrangement. Within a week, she had moved inside for good, 24/7, sleeping in our bed. And we had reorganized our lives to suit her convenience. We named her Midnight. Well, I thought, at least we didn't have to pay anything for her. I didn't realize at the time that for the next 35 years, we would own a series of cats and thereby contribute generously to the financial well-being of our veterinarian. Midnight was supposed to be an indoor cat, but she slipped out one evening for a night on the town. The ensuing litter of kittens put us into feline overload. However, Midnight was a well-behaved cat, and she taught her kittens all the rules of the house. For example, you don't claw the curtains. When a kitten misbehaved, she would pick it up by the scruff of the neck, carry it upstairs, walk into the closet, and stuff it head first into one of my shoes. We found homes for all of them. One of them was adopted by my office receptionist, who wanted to keep her job. We did keep one kitten from the litter, a gray male tabby whom the boys named Twilight. Within the next year or two, the boys acquired another pet, a hamster. It killed and partially ate a cage mate, smelled bad, ran all night in its squeaky little exercise wheel, and bit me when I tried to play with it. It was a vicious, nasty little beast, the first and only pet I ever hated. Well, one day I heard some odd scuffling noises from upstairs. When I went up to investigate, I found that the hamster had escaped from its cage. Twilight, now a full-grown cat, had cornered it in the bathroom and was closing in for the kill. Who am I thought, to interfere with nature? I was quietly closing the door And to my great dismay, Patty appeared armed with a broom. She swatted Twilight away before he could carry out nature's intent. He was understandably furious. For the next week, whenever Patty entered a room, he would stalk out, his nose in the air. Twilight was a good friend to us and to our sons, and a good son to his mother. But he ended up making a big mistake and paying dearly for it. Patty took pity on yet another small stray kitten and started feeding him on the back patio. One day, a loud noise startled him. He bit her and ran away. Of course, we had to call animal control to hold him and observe him for rabies. Patty put up posters all over the neighborhood, trying unsuccessfully to find his owner, because she knew that if no one claimed him, he would be put down. She couldn't sleep. She laid in bed all night muttering, "I am a cat murderer." I pointed out that the correct term was cat murderess, but she didn't seem to find my correction helpful. Needless to say, we adopted him. We named him Gandalf and brought him home. Twilight bullied him mercilessly to the point where we had to keep them separated. What Twilight didn't realize was that Gandalf would soon grow into a large, muscular male Russian blue with a long memory. Soon it was payback time. Gandalf was the alpha cat in our household for many years, and Twilight was never allowed to forget it. When life became too much for him under Gandalf's iron rule, he would run upstairs, hide in the closet, and bury his face in a shoe. Gandalf ruled the roost at our house for 17 years. But all good things must come to an end. Midnight, and then Twilight passed away. At my insistence, Patty agreed one cat was enough. No more. Gandalf would be it. Period. But despite his having terrorized Twilight for so long, he became seriously depressed when Twilight died, moping all day in his kitty cup with his paw over his eyes, no longer patrolling his domain or playing with the servants. That would be us. It was a sad day when Patty went to the vets in tears to pick up the little wooden box containing Twilight's ashes. She sat in the waiting room sobbing her heart out. That was when the receptionist said, "We're having a little trouble with our computer today. It's going to take a few minutes to figure out your bill. While you're waiting, would you like to hold this tiny homeless kitten sometime?" When I got home that night, Patty was sitting on the bed with a very strange look on her face. It's never good when a conversation begins with your wife saying, "You know how you always say that it's easier to obtain forgiveness than permission?" At that point, the kitten, a little orange tabby, ran out from under the bed. Then it was, "Please, please let me keep her. Oh, please let me keep her." Was I going to make Patty return the kitten? Did I want to sleep in the car that night? As you can see, I did not have to sleep in the car. We named the kitten Pumpkin for her color. Orange tabbies are supposed to have a sweet disposition, and Pumpkin was no exception. Pumpkin did one thing we could never have done. She jollied Gandalf out of his depression. She was his queen consort for many years, as they enjoyed a warm and lasting friendship. She taught Gandalf how to enjoy life again. Even I eventually came around. She was a charming, affectionate little creature. Gandalf couldn't resist her, and neither could I. Our next two cats, a munchkin named Roxanne and a Maine Coon cat named Isa, came to us courtesy of our son and his wife, who had moved into an apartment that did not allow pets. The arrangement was to have ended at the end of the year, when they relocated. Well, they relocated, but somehow the cats never got replanted. That was how, for years and years, we had 4 cats. Roxanne was an odd little cat. Typical of munchkins, she was fat, had short legs, and sat up in bed like a dog. She sometimes posed in unflattering positions. As you can see, she had a bit of a weird problem. But she was playful. We all enjoyed her antics. She loved playing with us, as in this picture with our son Mark. All right, I admit it, I was fond of her too. Then there was Isa. We really should have made our son take him back when he relocated. As you can see from this picture, that was never going to happen. By the way, Isa was originally named Isabella until our son was informed by the vet that a feminine name was not appropriate. Isa loved Roxanne with all his heart, but sadly, following a certain surgical procedure, he never succeeded in consummating the relationship, although he tried and tried and tried. Unfortunately, this annoyed Roxanne no end, but he never gave up. He did have other interests. For example, he loved helping with the laundry, or anything else we were trying to do, effectively interfering with our effort to accomplish whatever job was at hand. But he was a friendly host, graciously welcoming guests to our home, as in here, entertaining our granddaughter visiting from California. But then, a little over a year ago, Isa, the last of the four, passed away. We decided that we didn't really need another cat. Well, we were wrong. There was a cat-shaped hole in our lives that needed to be filled. So when a friend told us about a little female Manx that needed to be rehomed, we jumped at the chance. Cassie, our latest family member, is a well-behaved, friendly, and very affectionate little companion, a perfect fit for that cat-shaped hole.
I don't know how much longer I have to be in your company, so I decided to tell you about my out-of-body experience while there's still time. I've spent 80 years of my life looking for the answer to this 1-minute episode. When I was 10 years old, I toppled over this railing of our front porch, hit my head on the cement sidewalk below, and immediately began to drift up into the sky, leaving my body behind. The continued rise upward filled me with wonder, but I wasn't afraid. I decided that I was dying and going to heaven. And if so, Jesus would be there to greet me. Well, I turned around and looked every which way, but he was nowhere to be found, and neither was anyone else. What lay before me was the most beautiful, dark blue sky I had ever seen. It was misty. It was probably the substance of air, but maybe a little denser, and with tiny arcs of lights scattered throughout. Suddenly, the scene changed, and now I was looking down at my Detroit neighborhood. The long row of look-alike houses, the youngsters gathered around my body, the Packard building on the far side of the street. I saw it all clearly. Everything appeared normal, with one exception. The bright sunshine and the massive white clouds of the day had vanished. This fact and the dark blue sky were mystifying. Then I saw a man in a blue work shirt lean out of the Packard building window and ask if something were wrong. I heard my sister tell him that I had fallen and was unconscious. At that moment, I returned to my body again. My first impulse was to run inside to tell my mother about what happened. I found her in the kitchen preparing supper. "Mom," I cried. "Mom, I fell and almost died." My mother examined a large bump on my forehead and said, "The skin's not broken, so you're fine." She then gently ushered me back outdoors. "Now go out and play and don't go far, supper will soon be ready." I felt rejected. On the bridge of tears, I ran to my older sister. "Millie, I almost died. I went up in the sky, higher than the Packard building, and then Millie's mocking laughter caused me to stop short. "Silly goose," she exclaimed. "You were only out for a minute or so. You never left the ground. I was watching you. We all were watching you." I noticed that some of the others were looking at me strangely. That's it, I thought. I'll never attempt to share this with anyone again. Only God and I will know what happened. You're young and... Oh, skip the page. For weeks I felt traumatized. The need to express my feelings with another human being was overpowering. Then one day after school, I dared to stop by St. Bonaventure's monastery and ask to speak with Father Solanus Casey. I'm still in touch with him today. A Capuchin priest known to work miracles. Relaxed and confident, I met with Father Casey in a small anteroom in the rear of the church and told him everything about the fall, the dark blue sky and the missing sun in the clouds. I almost died, Father. I thought Jesus would be there, but he wasn't, I said. Father Casey shook his head in disbelief and took a deep breath. Child, Jesus isn't there for people when they almost die. He's only there when actually deceased. When they are actually deceased, does he welcome them into heaven? I said, oh. As for your out-of-body experience, you might have had one, but I doubt that it happened the way you remember it. Isn't it foolish to think that the sun and clouds could just vanish, and that the sky could turn dark blue in the middle of the day in a matter of seconds? Numbed by his words, I was unable to respond. Rather, I sat in silence and watched the way his beard bubbled when he talked. You are young and impressionable, he continued. I have a feeling the jolt to your brain played tricks on you. You imagined those things, child, nothing more. I left the monastery feeling empty. I no longer had a desire to discuss the matter at all. If I did, it was apt to be shallow and uninformative, like showing a person the cover of a book without telling them what was inside. Even so, the haunting memories refused to fade, and I was always on the alert for answers. Sometimes the sun-cast shadows or a certain cloud formation filled the sky took me back to that 1 minute in time. Occasionally, I'd sit quietly and reminisce, recounting every second of that fateful minute. Never did I doubt myself. Father Casey was wrong. Everything I professed to be true was true. None of it was a figment of my imagination. The years flew by. I married. I had a son. My son grew up and moved away. I worked for the Detroit Post Office, and then I worked for the United States Army. I retired and took up pottery making and then oil painting. My husband died. I spent 10 years living in Sarasota, then moved to Tallahassee to be near my son and daughter-in-law. The out-of-body experience no longer made an impression. It had become something that had happened a long time ago, something for which I no longer expected an answer. I was in my 90s when I moved in with Jim and Ann on Mitchell Avenue. One day I was alone in the house doing some ironing and half listening to a science program on radio when the commentator said, well, you know, when you get above the Earth's atmosphere, the sky is dark blue. My heartbeat quickened, and with tears streaming down my cheeks, I pulled the plug on the iron. Using my walker, I fled to Winthrop Park, sat under a giant tree, and cried until I could cry no more. Thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Finally, I had answers to my questions. I knew why the sky was dark blue, and why the sun and the clouds were out of sight. Instead of bringing peace of mind, the revelation brought realization that there were greater questions to the situation than ever. And this latest development, too, was mine alone to deal with. Who could I share this with? Who would believe me? I had not been a mere 50 feet above the ground, but an immeasurable number of miles above the earth, looking at a sky filled with tiny arcs of light. How did it happen? Did a force of nature respond to the set of circumstances generated by my fall and toss me into another reality where the tiny arcs of light were actually stars orbiting in a sky other than our own? How could I have been in deep space and at the same time able to focus on the spot of earth where my body lay? Why did I feel totally complete with just a soul? How much can a soul expand and still remain connected to its corporeal self? You see, I have the questions. I just don't have the answers. I believe that someday man, with his added curiosity and superior brain power, will understand the wonders of the universe and make them common knowledge. As for me, I'm convinced that there is much more to life than death. My goal is to continue toward my destiny, unafraid of anything.
I have a confession to make. I have been practicing theater without a license for many years. A recent email from my sister Judy reminded me just how many years. Judy recalled playing the role of Sparky's magic piano in one of my many backyard neighborhood productions. At one point, when she shifted her weight inside the cardboard grand piano, it collapsed, dumping her unceremoniously onto the lawn. Well, what can I say? In theater, you always have to expect the unexpected. I love those backyard productions for the way they brought all the neighborhood children together, and we had fun. The fun continued for me in high school, college, and community theater productions. So much so that in 1977, I, along with two other women, Joanne Tucker and Aid Whitaker, started a community musical theater group, Entertainment Plus, here in Tallahassee, which presented full-length productions of Broadway musicals for more than 10 years. Some of our actors are or have been residents at Westminster Oaks. You may recognize Walter Moore as Colonel Pickering in My Fair Lady. Sadly, much as I enjoyed the camaraderie with my friends in Entertainment Plus, my family was suffering from neglect, so after 2 years I had to pull back. I had been growing in my relationship with Jesus Christ, and I wanted to find a way to use my talents in service to the church. Everything came together in the summer of 1980 when I served as music director for Vacation Bible School at Epiphany Lutheran Church. The children were enthusiastic, and the pastor asked me if I would consider forming a children's choir. I had previously become acquainted with children's musicals for church, and I envisioned a choir that would sing for services once a month and put on a musical every year. My mission statement included the following: that the children would be exposed in depth to Bible stories and the teachings of Jesus, that they would become better musicians, and that they would develop close friendships with each other such that they would be like family to each other, something I myself had enjoyed so much in my own theatrical experiences. In the fall of 1980, the Epiphany Lutheran Junior Choir made its debut with 6 children from 4 families. The choir was for grades 2 through 5. As I cast about for an appropriate musical for this group, I found Babel at Babel, about the building and collapse of the infamous tower. It was an ambitious project for my little group of 6, so we pulled in 3 first graders and 2 kindergartners to sing and to serve as the slaves who built the tower. I used the music from the purchased scores, but I went back to the Bible and rewrote the script to include more verbatim lines from Scripture and to make it fit the talents of the individual children. This became my practice for all future musicals. We had no budget, so the blocks for the tower were large painted cardboard boxes, and the costumes were made from a combination of old men's t-shirts which had been tie-dyed and scraps of fabric from costumes I had made for Entertainment Plus. We decided to make the musical a Mother's Day gift for the children's mothers and to the church. In order to have some concentrated practice time, we relocated everything to Camp Indian Springs south of town the Friday before the performance. Spent the night in the cabins there, rehearsed all day Saturday with breaks, and returned after dinner. So the mothers had a day off just to relax, and the children were all primed for Sunday morning. They sang their hearts out, and the congregation loved it. The pastor from the University Lutheran Student Center invited the children to present the musical to his student members the following Sunday, and the idea of taking our show on the road was born. By the third year of its existence, the junior choir had recruited nearly every child at Epiphany in grades 2 through 5. At its largest, there were more than 50 children involved. The musical that year was It's Cool in the Furnace, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. With that many children, I had to be creative with my rewrite of the script in order to give each child a part in which his or her talents could shine. Some of the children were primed to learn lines and sing solos. Others wanted just 1 or 2 lines. The younger boys were eager to serve as Nebuchadnezzar's soldiers. And although everyone learned movements for the group songs, some of the girls wanted to do a special dance. I loved the natural reactions of the children on stage. When one little girl's costume became untucked while dancing, her partner reached over and tucked it back in, all the while dancing away without missing a beat. By this time, many members of the church offered their talents in support of the children. As you can see, we had a full orchestra, including adults and middle and high school students. My assistant director, to whom I will be eternally grateful, had a lot of demands placed on him. One of those demands was carrying the golden statue of Nebuchadnezzar into the church, where he was accosted by a friend who told him, "Bill, I don't think you've been paying attention to the lessons." We continue to operate on a shoestring budget. In this picture of Nebuchadnezzar and his soldiers, Nebuchadnezzar is wearing one of the t-shirt costumes. His crown is the cloth-covered lower half of a Clorox bottle. And the guards' helmets are made out of the top half of a 2-liter bottle covered with aluminum foil with a tassel stuck into the top. When Nebuchadnezzar ordered the 3 Hebrews to be thrown into the fiery furnace, his throne was moved to a side, the curtains behind it parted, and voila, a fiery furnace. It's Cool in the Furnace was the first musical we toured outside of Tallahassee. The children really enjoyed traveling together, adjusting quickly to new performance spaces, spending the night in groups of 2 with host families, and of course, being appreciated by the churches we visited. They had become very supportive of each other, and they were quick to compliment each other. This made the work very gratifying for me and others involved. But children grow older, and as they got ready to enter middle school, several of them came to me and asked if there were any way they could continue to be involved with the musicals. So the teen helpers came into being, and what a help they were, from creating choreography to rehearsing scenes with groups or lines with individuals. They were invaluable, and the younger children really looked up to them. I served as director of Epiphany Lutheran Junior Choir for 14 rewarding years. Even now, I am Facebook friends with many of its former members. And many of my original goals were met. These 3 slaves from the original production of Battle at Babel are now more than 50 years old, and they are still like family to each other. Although one lives in California, they stay in touch and get together whenever possible. 2 more quick shares and I'm done. Beauty and the Feast is based on the story of Esther. One Sunday, about a year after the junior choir production, a guest speaker gave a sermon on the book of Esther. After his sermon, the 4th grader, pictured here in pink, serving Ahasuerus, Haman, and Esther, came up to me and said, "He only read that book. We lived it." The child who played Zeresh, the domineering wife of Haman in Beauty and the Feast, is now a professional actress in Chicago, but she got her start in the junior choir. In addition to her onstage performances in Chicago, she has appeared in a nationally televised ad for Cialis, and last year we got to watch her on Netflix in an episode of Chicago Med. Not all of my choristers have continued in music or theater, and sadly some have left the church. but I have heard from so many that they still have fond memories of their time in the junior choir, of the friendships they formed there, and of the creativity they found within themselves in that loving and supportive environment. I was blessed to have been a part of it.